Good afternoon or good evening, depending on where you might be. My name is Kevin Michael Grace, and this is the KMG show for Tuesday, February the 8th, 2022. Headline: Princess Rockstar returns to Ottawa. If you didn't know, the Prime Minister of Canada, Justin Trudeau, fled in terror from the Freedom Convoy and was held in a undisclosed secure location, or a series of undisclosed secure locations for the last 10 days. But now he's back. Truckers are still in Ottawa. Let's look at the headlines from CBC. Large number of children among protesters in Ottawa, hampering response, police say. Ottawa police working with Children's Aid Society around concerns for children in convoy. That sounds sinister. Ottawa protest inspires talk of copycat convoys in U.S. and beyond. What Ontario truckers heading to U.S. border are saying about Ambassador Bridge protest. Yes, the Ambassador Bridge links Windsor, Ontario with Detroit, Michigan, and it has been blocked by angry truckers. Canadian flag at convoy protest surfaces emotions of pride and anger. This trucker died of COVID-19. Now his mother has a message for convoy protesters. Golly, I wonder what that message might be. The protest convoy could cast a long shadow in Canadian politics. The key lesson of Ottawa's siege might be that it's difficult to get populist, anti-democratic anger to leave once you've invited it in and allowed it to get comfortable. Sounds cozy. Uh-oh. Our journalists are facing more harassment, threats for doing their jobs. Oh, that is such a sad, sad story, and troubling as well. This is from Brody Fenlon. As vaccine mandate protests rolled into Ottawa and later other cities this past weekend, CBC took extra measures to ensure the safety of our journalists covering these events. We reduced our visibility and hired extra security. We identified fallback positions for our reporters and field crews. We conducted risk assessments for each deployment. Okay, again, enough with the military metaphors. These precautions were warranted. We've seen multiple examples over the last several weeks of our teams and other Canadian media being verbally harassed, threatened, and intimidated simply for doing the job of journalism. Yeah, okay. And the job of journalism is to trust the experts. Everyone must get jabbed, and jabbed again, and maybe a fourth time. And anyone who disagrees is, probably a neo-Nazi. Let's see. What else do we have here? From the Canadian Press, Conservatives split on whether convoy protests should stay or vacate Parliament Hill. CEO of Canada's largest trucking company says vaccine mandate not an issue at all. Process Nerd, how MPs can keep spotlight on COVID protests. And what does Princess Rockstar have to say? According to CBC, it has to stop. Trudeau accuses protesters of blockading democracy during a Commons debate. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau accused the Ottawa convoy protesters of trying to derail Canada's democracy during an emergency debate about demonstrations against COVID-19 public health restrictions and vaccine mandates. The protesters in Ottawa are, quote, trying to blockade our economy, our democracy, and our fellow citizens' daily lives. It has to stop. The people of Ottawa don't deserve to be harassed in their own neighborhoods, and perhaps the people of Canada don't deserve the blockade of our economy, which was ushered in with panicked lockdown measures and vaccine mandates and the like. The Prime Minister delivered his remarks in person from the Commons, his first public appearance since testing positive for COVID-19 on January 31st. He reiterated, or repeated, as a literate person would say, the federal government's commitment to helping bring an end to the Ottawa protests now in its second week. Trudeau did not announce any new measures related to the protest. The federal government will be there with whatever resources the province and city needs in this situation, Trudeau said. House of Commons Speaker Anthony Rota agreed to hold the emergency debate Monday on the protests in Ottawa after NDP leader Jagmeet Singh made the request earlier in the day. Jagmeet Singh wants to ban things in Canada, not just swastikas, but also the Confederate flag. People around the world are looking at Canada right now, looking at Ottawa right now, and asking what's happening, Singh said. Yeah, and? Singh went on to denounce the protest, pointed to some participants' recent displays of hateful symbols, the incessant horn honking, which ended with a court order yesterday, and harassment of residents. This convoy protest is not a peaceful protest, Singh said. He doesn't seem to like Canadians very much. And this is from the Post-Millennial. Justin Trudeau responded to the press conference held by a Liberal MP, in which he criticized the lack of a clear way out of COVID restrictions, as well as the divisive rhetoric used by members of his party. Trudeau said that he understood the frustration with restrictions. Yes, of course you do. But said that mandates were necessary to avoid future restrictions. See, we're taking away your freedoms now, so we won't have to take them away later. Isn't that a variation of the old joke from Popeye? I'd gladly pay you Tuesday for a hamburger today. I think one of the things we all understand is just how frustrated everyone is. We're all tired of restrictions, of mandates, of having to make sacrifices, of not being able to do the things we love. It's been 2 years, and it's really, really tiring for all of us. This government has been focused every step of the way of following the best science and the best public health advice to keep as many people safe as possible. And quite frankly, it has worked. Canadians got vaccinated. I can understand frustrations with mandates, but mandates are the way to avoid further restrictions. As Canadians get vaccinated, as Canadians have gotten vaccinated, we've been able to get through things, and this team is going to stay focused on doing exactly that. Justin Trudeau has been vaxxed 3 times, and guess what? He got COVID. And after the vaccine rollout really ramped up, guess what? The number of infections skyrocketed. But correlation is not causation. That's what the people who love science keep telling me. Trudeau, this is from Kane at Citizen Free Press. Trudeau ordered 10 vaccine injections for every Canadian. The company in question is Acuitas Therapeutics, which owns the lipid nanoparticle delivery system used in both the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines. The company is paid a royalty for every shot. It is alleged the Trudeau Foundation owns 40% of the common stock. This is from the Canadian Press. A Liberal member of Parliament is calling out his own government for what he says is its divisive management of the COVID-19 pandemic. Joel Lightbound told reporters in Ottawa today that federal COVID-19 measures, such as vaccination mandates for travelers and civil servants, need to be reevaluated, and the public needs a clear roadmap for when restrictions will be fully lifted. Lightbound, who represents the Louis Hébert riding in Quebec City, says he worries the Liberal government of Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has a tone and policies that are divisive and risk undermining public trust. Meanwhile, the premiers of Saskatchewan and Quebec are set to hold news conferences on the coronavirus in their provinces today. Saskatchewan Premier Scott Moe is expected to announce a plan to remove or reduce partial health orders. Oh, and this from Roberto Wakerell of the Post Millennial. The Liberal MP who called the Prime Minister's pandemic response divisive and accused it of having become politicized has resigned from his position as the chair of the Quebec caucus for the Liberal Party. Following my press conference this morning, I've decided to resign as chair of the Quebec caucus. I will be very happy to support my successor in the continuation of our work. Lightbound added that he is not the only person uncomfortable with the Trudeau Liberals' handling of the situation, and even went so far to say that his government was using health mandates and restrictions to wedge and stigmatize those who were not submitting to mandates. There's a piece by Paul Wells and Maclean's The Joel Lightbound Crisis in the Liberal Party. The MP's astonishing criticism of Liberal policy on COVID restrictions is the most serious threat to Trudeau's leadership since Jane Philpott quit the federal cabinet. Yes, imagine a member of the House of Commons having his own opinions. Absolutely shocking. All of this is happening, Paul Wells writes, while a bunch of truckers, scare quote, some fraction of whom hold pestilential views, and some of whom control immovable and potentially unstoppable concentrations of rolling metal. Username available, unstoppable concentrations of rolling metal, continue to occupy downtown Ottawa, which is also part of Dylan McGuire's point. Lightbound will be is already accused of advocating surrender to blackmail. I'm torn here, Wells confesses. On the one hand, it was disappointing that so many questions at Lightbound's news conference were about the very caucus politics I lead with here, instead of about the substance of his argument. On the other hand, I do believe Lightbound's sortie today constitutes the most serious threat since, A few things about Lightbound. He's not super likable in the way smart guys can sometimes be a bit much. He's chippy and has no discernible sense of humor. Honestly, I am pleased when anyone in this city shows any personality, so do not take this as a criticism. We keep hearing rumors that Justin Trudeau is going to resign. I suppose then, he can travel the world as a sock ambassador. Jen, not Jennifer, but Jen Gerson, at her Substack, The Line, has a essay called The Backlash. If you don't see the peril here, well, all I can say is enjoy Prime Minister Pierre and all of the inevitable drama that the coming populist wave will entail. And her big problem with the Freedom Convoy is American money. Yeah, now do Tides. Tides is one of the most influential environmentalist group in this country, and it is funded by, Americans. Also, George Soros, he's a good guy, right? We don't care that that's foreign money. Gerson writes, the problem here is that whether the protesters see it or not, they and their cause are being idolized and even funded by a far-right American fringe that has an agenda of its own. Our capital has been paralyzed by a few hundred long-haul trucks. Don't imagine that this situation is going unnoticed by our strategic enemies, who will look at this protest as a model for our future disruptions here and in other democratic countries. I have no doubt that a subsection of true lunatics and radicals are looking at Ottawa as an opportunity for a training run in street combat. But there is no street combat going on in Ottawa. Ottawa police ought to be enforcing parking and noise bylaws. The hunking was ended by court order yesterday, Jen. Civil disobedience does not absolve protesters from legal consequences for illegal actions, and reports of police officers refusing to write tickets or even providing fuel to the truckers are obviously a problem. But I think a hardline response to this protest risks a very, very bad scenario. If you think our current state of polarization and civil unrest is bad now, how do you think it's going to look if the police storm in and leave a handful of dead truckers in the street to become martyrs of a country these people have already deemed tyrannical? That's this. So we can either leave them as they are and wait for them to go away, or kill them. Those are the options. Jen, Tasha Karedin writes in the National Post, the more Tories support the convoy protest, the less appeal they will hold for voters. Tasha Karedin is a longtime political hack who was very important in the so-called Unite the Right movement of the 1990s. And she is a PR spiv who works for a PR spivery called Navigator. She has been very vocal against the Freedom Convoy. And then it was revealed, according to CBC News, Ottawa police hire elite crisis management firm to handle protest messaging. Navigator. Oh, that Navigator. How about that? And Tasha Karedin, was her company negotiating with the Ottawa police while she was denouncing the truckers? Was she auditioning for this job? She has still tweeted. She tweeted about the truckers after February the 4th. I'll repeat that I think that it should be mandatory that when all PR spivs contribute op-ed columns to newspapers or else on the internet, and there are an awful lot in my country because political opinion is dominated by PR spivs, they must be required to note at the bottom of the column or to a linked file on the internet all of their company's clients, because otherwise it's an outrageous conflict of interest. But this story has just gotten even more hilarious. Oh, we see Stephen Taylor, a longtime Conservative Party hack, tweets, "For the sake of everyone, this protest needs to end." But back to Tasha. In the past 48 hours, I've received many calls encouraging me to run for the leadership of the Conservative Party of Canada. I'm humbled and honored and feel a duty to take these inquiries seriously. It is the party of John A. Macdonald, John Diefenbaker, Brian Mulroney, and Stephen Harper. It must offer solutions to Canada's challenges, energy and resource development, the environment, Indigenous reconciliation, and national unity. I believe our party must bring these elements together to inspire Canadians. If I run, I would offer such a vision and encourage a robust debate of ideas. And you can be sure that the lady's not for turning. Oh, you're like Margaret Thatcher, are you? Thank you, and I look forward to sharing my decision with you soon. Run, Tasha, run. Because I love laughter. And let's go to the chat. Hello to Urban Planner William Hicks, Don from Beyond, David the Gnome, who says, "I'll be honest, I didn't know Ottawa was the capital of Canada until the truckers thing." Don from Beyond said, "For some reason, listening to KMG calms my nerves, even when he's discussing dire subjects, and boy, does he make me laugh. The best medicine." Why, thank you. Too kind. They don't have any concerns about kids being given the jab, though, do they, says William Hicks. Well, more on that later. Hello to Martin Matushak, who says, "Did someone change the definition of democracy and not pass on the message?" Hello to Anrun. David Wright, Gordon Azazio, Gamion, No Sleep Till Breezewood, Pennsylvania. Yes, Wimpy said that, indeed. Hello to Dr. Deadname, who says, "I've heard that a small number of senior party officials make all the policy decisions and Trudeau basically announces them." I think that that's true. You know, a lot of Canadians have complained that Justin Trudeau seems to be very lazy for a prime minister, but that's a good thing if you love Canada, because he is a deeply stupid man. And so it's probably best that he stay away from policy making. David the Gnome says, "Do you think Trudeau cried at some point when he went into hiding?" I don't know. Maybe he cried when he was listening to his Bette Midler records. William Hicks says, "The old Jan and Dean song went 2 girls for every boy. Trudeau's version, 2 jabs for everyone." No, 3. David Wright says, "It's nice to see the Justin Castro meme taking off." Hello to Palpicasso88 and Peter Bauman, who says, "Praise a Keck." Hello to Zen Master Football Analysis. True Greenberg says, "I don't like the word robust." And what happens in Canada if you wave a ye old Dominion flag? Well, yes, the red ensign, which was our flag until it was replaced by the Pearson pennant, the dreadful generic flag in 1965. The red ensign is now seen as a hate symbol. I don't know, perhaps because it has the cross on it. Perhaps because it has, emblems from England, Scotland, and Ireland. Probably many, many reasons. And let's get back to it here. Tasha Coredin, Prime Minister of Canada. Ho, ho, ho. Very satirical. And let's talk about Vice. Yes, the Antifa adjacent news organization. National Post journalists in revolt over column denying racism. In audio from a town hall, National Post journalists are heard grilling their editors about the publication of a column by Rex Murphy. I should declare an interest here. Rex Murphy had me on twice on his old CBC radio show, and he was quite decent to me. But this is the absolute state of Canada today. People called Manishna Krishnan and Vanmala Subramaniam instruct Canadians as to what they are allowed to think and say. Oh, the opinion editor, I suppose that would be Matt Gurney, called the publication of this piece by Rex Murphy an F-up. Way to stand by your journalists there, Matt. Vice News has obtained an audio recording of the town hall, which took place June 10th, as well as an email exchange between journalists at the newspaper and editor-in-chief Rob Roberts about the opinion piece titled, "Canada is not a racist country, despite what the Liberals may say." Oh, is that the official policy of Canada's conservative newspaper, that Canada is a racist country? The email sent to Roberts June 4th described Murphy's column as lazy, ignorant, and dehumanizing to Black and Indigenous people. What about the people of color? It's BIPOC. Come on, Vice, get with the program. It was signed by about 30 journalists, more than half the Post newsroom. For journalists of color in the National Post newsroom, every time a piece like this is published, we feel more unwelcome at this paper and come closer to giving up on this industry. Well, perhaps you should give up on it because it is a dying industry, which is only kept alive by hundreds of millions of dollars from, guess what, the Trudeau government. In a subsequent town hall that lasted nearly 2 hours, Post reporters grilled newsroom managers on how the column came to be published, why there hasn't been any public accountability, editorial independence, and lack of diversity within the company. Roberts and Matt Gurney, the Post opinion editor, explained to staff that Murphy's column was published as a result of miscommunication, where each thought the other was going to edit the piece, which had been discussed as a front page option. Rob thought it was being edited in the comment section, and I thought it was being edited in the newsroom. By the time either of us realized that neither he nor I had actually taken ownership of it to give it a proper editorial review, it had been copy edited and proofread and put online. It was an F-up, and I know that's not a satisfying answer to all the people here, and it certainly isn't for me to offer. Okay. Rex Murphy is not an employee of the National Post. He's a freelance contributor. First off, opinion pieces are not supposed to be edited for content. They're supposed to be checked for, silogisms, obvious, errors, checked for a possible defamation or incitement. Apart from that, they're supposed to be left alone. Murphy's column argued that most Canadians are horrified by racism. We are, in fact, not a racist country, though to say so may shock some, he wrote. Yes, how prescient of him. Gurney said Murphy's column wasn't at a level that I would have wanted it to be. At a level? In particular, he said the statement declaring Canada isn't racist, which ended up being the headline, was indefensible. Yeah. Canadian conservative journalism, the regime media, absolutely useless. Well, worse than useless. Rebel News reports last week I showed you Rex Murphy's column in the National Post that made the case that, while not perfect, Canada is not a systemically racist country. And a young Indo-Canadian woman from Sri Lanka, actually fairly new to Canada, condemned not only Rex as racist, but condemned Canada racist. After that, 30 other National Post employees piled on. They signed an email condemning Rex Murphy. I'd like to know who those 30 employees are. Perhaps the reason that they're so angry is that it's my understanding that people in their position are expected to work, about 70 hours a week and to be on call anytime, and they're paid about $2,000 a month. Not a very good job. Justin Ling, who was formerly with Vice, I forget who he's with now, has this piece in The Guardian, 5G and QAnon, how conspiracy theorists steered Canada's anti-vaccine trucker protest. Ottawa's occupation was a result of an unrivaled coordination between anti-vax and anti-government organizations. Oh, sounds sinister, doesn't it? And, we have a failure here of our intelligence community. This is from Tom Spears in the Ottawa Citizen. Why Canadian intelligence agencies never saw the Ottawa trucker blockade coming. CISA's briefing notes show the agency believed a threat would come from an extremist lone actor against a high-profile target. Instead, we have a blockade of the capital by a group of angry truckers. Yeah. Candice Bergen, who is now the temporary or interim leader of the Conservative Party, was photographed having pizza at a table in a restaurant, a booth, with three of the protesters. And Justin Ling is furious. He's absolutely furious. I responded to him, you don't like pizza, or more to the point, you hate people who work for a living, or perhaps it's their non-hipster beards that offend you. And where was our intelligence community? Wow. I hope someone gets fired for that blunder. Let's turn to Austria, which seems to be imitating the past. This is from Steve Watson at Summit News. After Austria became the first European country to mandate COVID vaccines for the entirety of its population, details have emerged on how the government plans to enforce the measure. Reports note that citizens will be stopped randomly in the street and pulled over in their vehicles and forced to comply with vaccine status checks by the authorities. If, heaven forbid, a person is found to be unvaccinated, they will be fined on the spot, with the penalty increasing for each violation. A first offense will mean a €600 fine, with subsequent violations reaching up to €3,400. The Austrian government will check citizens' vaccination status against their vaccine registry. Anyone found to not have 2 vaccines plus a booster will be punished accordingly. The development confirms previous reports that the Austrian government will hire people to hunt down vaccine refusers. Indeed, this is merely an official confirmation of what has already been happening in the country. After the government placed the unvaccinated under an unprecedented lockdown, footage emerged showing police patrolling shops and highways, checking people's vaccination status. Days after imposing the lockdown on the unvaccinated, Austria hit a new COVID case record. In addition, the Austrian government has shortened the period in which vaccinations remain valid, meaning citizens are required to receive their next dose 90 days earlier than previously. The government has put a sunset on the law for January of 2024, meaning Austrians face at least another 2 years of COVID tyranny. As we have previously reported, an amendment to the law could also see those who refuse to pay the fines for being unvaccinated imprisoned. The amendment also orders people who are jailed to pay for their own imprisonment. That's not quite as good as the Chinese trick, the communist Chinese trick, where, after they shoot dissidents, they bill the families for the cost of the bullets. Perhaps Austria will get there one day. Oh, how's this affecting business? Not well. This is, again, from Summit News, from Paul Joseph Watson. Restaurant owners in Minneapolis and St. Paul say they have lost up to 40% in business thanks to the introduction of vaccine passports. After the mayors of the Twin Cities imposed the scheme for restaurants, nightclubs, and bars last month, businesses in Minneapolis sued authorities for what they asserted was a calculated and proposed attempt to prod the general public toward vaccination at the expense of their livelihoods. A court refused to side with the business owners, but they've been proven right just 2 weeks after the mandate came into effect. Unfortunately, when the vaccine or test mandate went into effect, we saw a 30% drop in our Minneapolis locations overnight, said Craft and Crew Hospitality co-owner Luke Derheim. Derheim noted how people were avoiding city locations and going to the suburbs to escape having to comply with the vaccine passport scheme. St. Paul Mayor Melvin Carter suggested that the mandate had reduced infection rates, then he is either ignorant or is lying, because quite the reverse has happened. Now, let's get back to Canada. This is from the Canadian press. Almost 2/3 of Canadians oppose the Ottawa protests against COVID-19 measures, with more than 4 in 10 saying they strongly consider the demonstration a selfish display, a new poll suggests. But almost 30% of Canadians surveyed by Leger disagreed with that characterization of the demonstration against COVID-19 measures that has seen hundreds of large trucks create gridlock and incessant noise in the national capital. In addition, 44% of those polled said they sympathized with the frustrations being voiced by the protesters. These are rather remarkable figures, good news rather than bad news, given that the vaccine hesitant have been demonized by governments and the media. And of course, the Freedom Convoy, we are assured by intelligence experts and disinformation experts, it's foreign money, stinking foreign money, and they're probably all neo-Nazis. So the fact that so many Canadians support them is good news. This is from Cody Wilson at CP24. Ottawa is reporting another 42 virus-related deaths as the province continues to see a steady decrease in the number of COVID-19 patients in hospitals week over week. And let's look at the new numbers. Another 2,092 cases were confirmed by provincial labs today. That's down from 2,622 last week. Of the new cases confirmed today, 236 involve people with unknown vaccination status, 92 involve people who are partially vaccinated, 362 involve people who are unvaccinated, and 1,402 involve those who have received at least 2 doses of a COVID vaccine. Yeah, it's not working. It's not working, folks. Let's see if government of Ontario has been updating its... Nope, they're not updating the numbers. They claim they are, but they've stopped. I wonder how they're able to get away with that. And it seems, I know that journalists will be just aghast over this, but it seems that the panic is abating. This is from Jacob Cerebrin at the Canadian Press. Saskatchewan and Quebec announced plans to lift COVID-19 restrictions Tuesday. Quebec! This is where they had curfews, saying it will increasingly be up to citizens to assess the risks they may face from the virus. Prince Edward Island, Canada's Toy Town province, also outlined plans to end most restrictions early in April, with Premier Dennis King cautioning that the loosening is not a declaration of victory. COVID is still with us, and it will be with us, he said. You mean like the flu? Remember the flu? Remember how, some people would get really, really sick? They'd miss days of work, sometimes a whole week. But everyone seems to have forgotten the flu. This is from the Canadian Press again. Alberta Premier Jason Kenney says he will announce later today a plan to reduce COVID-19 health restrictions. Let's see, I believe the 5 o'clock, was it a 5 o'clock press? No, I don't know. But anyway, and the provinces are moving. I haven't heard anything from my own province of British Columbia. Again, from the Canadian Press, Saskatchewan is lifting all of its pandemic public health orders in a phased approach that is to begin Monday with the removal of the COVID-19 vaccine passport policy. At the end of the month, it also plans to end its indoor mask mandate and the requirement for people to self-isolate if they test positive for the virus. Premier Scott Moe said Tuesday that providing proof of vaccination to enter businesses, including restaurants, had helped to fight the infection spread. But it also created deep divisions in the province, in effect, 2 classes of citizens, he said. Oh, but in Toronto, they're still holding that panic torch high. From Chris Fox at CP24, Toronto is preparing to launch a new hyper-local vaccination push in the city's East End as it releases new data showing that individuals who have not yet received a booster dose as 4 times likely to end up in hospital with COVID-19 as those who have. Yeah. It's funny. That's not what the government of Ontario's numbers say, but never mind the numbers which aren't being updated. This is local, targeted, and effective effort to help people get vaccinated. In many cases, it literally involves knocking on individual doors. Golly, I hope they don't break them down. Floor by floor and building by building to convince people to go. Yeah, who needs informed consent? Said Mayor John Tory. As I once described John Tory, was absolute disaster as leader of the Ontario Progressive Conservative Party, of the fag end, as being the fag end of the Canadian aristocracy. Wow. Good news for Pfizer? Let's see. This is from Susan Berry, PhD at the Star News Network. Pfizer announced last week the Food and Drug Administration had asked the drug company and its partner BioNTech to submit data on a COVID vaccine series for babies as young as 6 months old. Albert Bourla, chairman and CEO of Pfizer, he's a veterinarian, by the way, said in the statement, as hospitalizations of children under 5 due to COVID-19 have soared, our mutual goal with the FDA is to prepare for future variant surges and provide parents with an option to help protect their children from this virus, which is kind of strange given that we now know for a fact that the Pfizer vaccine, 1, 2, and 3 doses, does not protect people from the Omicron variant. We're getting closer and closer to my joke becoming reality, that Pfizer, would like to vaccinate babies in utero. And, oh yes, punchable face. This is from Lindsay Cornick at Fox News. Democratic strategist James Carville cursed out unvaccinated individuals on his podcast last week, saying anyone without a vaccine was a piece of shit and he wanted to punch them in the face. On Thursday's Politics War Room with James Carville and Al Hunt, Carville and Hunt took a listener question wondering why President Biden would not pass a bill that bars unvaccinated citizens from interstate travel. I wouldn't be against that at all, said Al Hunt. I'd be for it, actually, as long as you put or testing. Before you get on a plane or bus or interstate train, you want to be vaccinated or tested. I don't think the Supreme Court would allow him to do that, Hunt said. I don't either, Carville replied. Carville continued by suggesting a new law giving immunity to anyone for punching an unvaccinated person. Quote, I wish what they do is pass a law to make you immune from liability if you punch some unvaccinated person right in the face, which I'd really like to do. If you ask me what my first reaction to you is, if you're not vaccinated, you don't have any medical reason not to be, you're a piece of shit, okay? I want to punch you in the GD face. That's the way I look at these people, unquote. Al Hunt replied, agreed. This is especially ironic given that James Carville has the most punchable face in America. I keep reading all of these stories about Loudoun County, Virginia, and its public schools. This is the craziest school district in America. Well, I know there's a lot of competition for that. This is from Jeremiah Poff at the Washington Examiner. A security official for Loudoun County Public Schools in Virginia directed principals to obtain a warrant from a magistrate if students attempted to enter the school without wearing masks, the latest escalation in the Commonwealth's mask wars. An email sent by Loudoun County Public Schools Director of Safety and Security, John Clark, to the district's principals shows Clark outlined a series of steps they should take to enforce the district's mask mandate, including how to obtain a warrant from a magistrate and limiting parental access to school buildings. The email was sent February 1st and came as Loudoun elected to defy Governor Glenn Youngkin's executive order allowing parents to opt their children out of school mask mandates. A state judge in Arlington issued a temporary restraining order against Youngkin's order Friday, which the governor said would be appealed. I wish one day that one of these governors say, would say the same thing that Andrew Jackson said about Supreme Court ruling. Justice Marshall has made his decision. Now let him enforce it. Let's look what Jim Kunstler has to say and his latest column. Hang on, let me get the latest one here. It's called Wake Up Call. I must say, I believe the truth of our predicament will grow a lot weirder as we stumble into springtime. How many times have I reminded you that history is a prankster? Who would have guessed that Canada, demure, inoffensive, shrinking violet among nations, would rise to lead a worldwide revolt against the satanic dominion of digital neo-Bolshevism? I mean, what else can you call it? The political St. Vitus dance sweeping Western civ that seeks to destroy every constitutional liberty, deprive citizens of life, property, and even language, and reduce every individual to an internet-surveilled and controlled automaton. This global megalomaniacal mental illness posturing as government. Well, now it has happened. And the head of Canada's government, Justin Trudeau, arguably the most fatuous would-be tyrant in the former free world, has failed to emerge from his hidey hole. This was published yesterday morning for the better part of a week, perhaps afraid of seeing his shadow like the groundhog of legend. And it begins to look as if his days as prime minister grow short. It's rumored that the Canadian military told Trudeau in plain, unwoke Canadian English to F off. They will not take orders to put down the truckers' protest, and even the Mounties are wobbling, so it's left to Ottawa police, who threaten to arrest anyone aiding the truckers with food, water, and fuel. Wait and see how quickly that will turn to fighting in the streets. Constitutional crisis, eh? Meanwhile, a dozen or so members of the Western Civ Club of Nations are ditching their COVID-19 mandates and restrictions. The reason, despite the mighty forces of deliberate, organized mind effery and resulting mass delusion, the COVID-19 vaccines are finally revealed as a criminal fraud, a danger to all who submitted to them, and an insult to the age-old accrued intelligence of the human race, as used to be represented by science, ethics, and law. Some powerful counter-information to the official narrative emerged last week from the U.S. military's own Defense Medical Epidemiology database, when several whistleblower doctors revealed to attorney Tom Renz heretofore suppressed statistics on the shocking increase of vaccine injuries among young, otherwise able-bodied soldiers. Have a look at the list reported out of Dr. Malone's Substack newspaper. Total number of diseases and injuries reported by year, hospitalization up 30%. Diseases of the nervous system up 968%. Malignant neuroendocrine tumor reports up 276%. Acute myocardial infarct reports up 343%. Acute pericarditis reports up by 70%. Pulmonary embolism reports up 260%. Anxiety reports up 2,361%. Suicide reports up 227%. Neoplasms for all cancers up 218%. Malignant neoplasms for digestive organs up 477%. Neoplasms for breast cancer up 469%. Neoplasms for testicular cancer up 298%. Female infertility reports up 419%. Dysmenorrhea reports up 221%. Ovarian dysfunction reports by year up 299%. Male infertility reports up 320%. Guillain-Barré syndrome reports up 520%. Acute transverse myelitis reports up 494%. Seizure reports up 298%. Narcolepsy and cataplexy reports up 352%. Multiple sclerosis up 614%. Migraines up 352%. Hypertension up 2,130%. Well, what the Department of Defense said in response to this was, whoopsie, it turns out that these numbers are no good because we got the baseline wrong. We just, for the last 5 years, we totally screwed up the baseline. But you should trust our new numbers because, we're not making them up or anything like that because, that would be wicked. And we don't do wicked things. Let's go to Steve Kirsch's newsletter. Here's a list of top COVID misinformation spreaders you should investigate ASAP. The Department of Homeland Security is now going after COVID misinformation spreaders, considering them terrorist threats. Here's my list of people I think they should be investigating. And President Joe Biden, CDC Director Rochelle Walensky, NIAID Director Anthony Fauci, U.S. Surgeon General Vivek Murthy, FDA Commissioner Janet Woodcock, COVID-19 Guidelines Chairman Cliff Lane, Bill Gates, Tom Shiabukuro, CDC vaccine expert, John Su, CDC VAERS expert, Stephen Anderson, the top vaccine safety official at the FDA, Gavin Newsom, Governor of California, and Richard Pan, California State Senator. He further writes, mainstream media reports of vaccine death. Wow, I didn't think it could ever happen. A mainstream media TV station reported the person died from the vaccine. The coroner said so. Dr. Brian Brittle and colleagues challenge Canada's 3 top health authorities to a debate this Friday. Negative vaccine efficacy example in the UK. This is hard to explain. I suggest this could be a good conversation starter with those who believe that the vaccines are effective. I can confirm this is a report from Blackpool in Britain from the NHS. Of the 162 vaccinated patients, 130 had received their booster or third dose. There were 182 COVID positive inpatients in our trust within 14 days of the first positive diagnosis. And 162 of them were vaccinated, 130 had received the booster. But come on, booster works, right? I mean, Justin Trudeau got one and look what happened to him. Let's go to the Substack of Eugippius. Paralysis. The Wendepunkt has come, and Germany finds itself near the crest of its Omicron wave. Almost 3.5% of the entire country is officially positive for SARS-2 right now. Unofficially, as many as 15% are probably infected. Hospitalizations and deaths, meanwhile, remain well below their peaks from 2021. Omicron is mild as promised, and everyday corona fades further from the headlines. Journalists want to talk about other things all of a sudden, about Russia and Joe Biden, about Josef Ratzinger, about the death of Götz Werner. The manic drive for perpetual vaccination has all but stalled. Courts in Bavaria and more recently in Hessen have overturned rules banning the unvaccinated from shops. All discussion of new restrictions, of new metrics, of new rules is increasingly taboo. The hystericists are on the defensive, and yet even as the urgency has been drained from the containment apparatus, containment continues. The coalition government, the institutions, and the press have entered a period of profound paralysis. Here and there, rules might fall away, but there will be no abrupt change in course for the foreseeable future. There will only be vague promises for the summer. In March 2022, Germany imposed restrictions to reduce transmission and save our hospitals. That was the official justification anyway, however stupid it feels to type that now. In February 2022, we imposed restrictions because restrictions have become things that we impose when people test positive for corona. We aren't trying to spare our intensive care units or to improve our mortality statistics or anything like that. Nobody talks about goals anymore at all. Masks and capacity limits and testing and green passes have become routine aspects of public life, observed for their own sake because they make some people feel better. What I feared most last fall was the normalization of containment and vaccination policies. Crazy vaccinators hawking 6th booster doses are a problem in the moment, but it is the bureaucrats in the back rooms planning stable policies for the longer term who might well destroy the world. The ominous thing now in Germany are the hints we get here and there of plans for an indefinite regime of corona management. I still think it is unlikely this will happen. I still think that once EU hardliners like Germany, Italy, and France begin to withdraw the containment regime, the political pressure for further liberation will surge, and this will all end in weeks. Not everyone wants that to happen, though, and there is a non-zero chance we end up in an indefinite purgatory of annual mass vaccination drives, arbitrary mask mandates, and recurring seasonal restrictions. Well, it's an old German saying, vaccines will make you free. Let's go to Alex Berenson's Substack. Elena Mercer, who I used to work with years ago, is very angry with Alex Berenson because he wrote the two pieces about Joe Rogan, saying that Berenson was distressed at the language that Joe Rogan had used. I don't know. Perhaps he is. I think that he was sincere in this. He has a piece, The Pathetic Collapse of Team Apocalypse. In the last few weeks, coronavirus infections in the United States have hit stunning new heights. COVID deaths are second only to their January 21 peak, a peak probably driven by first dose mRNA vaccinations of the elderly. But don't get me started. In response to this unprecedented COVID wave, Democrats and their media allies are calling for school closures, more masking rules, and new lockdown restrictions. We need to follow the science and come together as a nation, President Biden said in a special Oval Office address. A few more weeks of shared sacrifice will get us through this dark winter. These restrictions have worked before and they will work again. Whoa, sorry, drifted off for a minute. Back here in the real world, exactly the opposite is happening. The COVID wave notwithstanding, Democrats and the blue checks are sprinting away from every restriction and mandate and rule they have shoved down the throats of Americans for the last 2 years. Masks, who needs them? Last July, when the United States had under 40,000 COVID infections a day, Dr. Leanna Wen, a CNN staple, lashed out at states that had ended mask mandates. And today Dr. Wen is singing a different tune. Today, Dr. Wen believes in medical autonomy. Yes, Dr. Wen, who also famously said last year that she thought life should be hard for Americans who chose not to receive a COVID vaccine, is now all about individual choice. Kind of surprising she didn't believe in personal choice all along, since she once was president of Planned Parenthood. Then again, she only lasted 8 months there before her tenure was, well, abruptly aborted. But I digress. School closures? Don't even, sister. The New York Times writes, we learned our lesson last year, do not close schools. Lockdowns, not in this life or the next. The White House is actually blaming Trump for social distancing and lockdowns. This new stance, Berenson writes, marks a rather remarkable turnaround. I'm old enough to remember that night in March 2021 when Joe Biden told us that if we were good little boys and girls, he might allow us to gather in small groups for Independence Day. A July 4th with your loved ones is the goal, he told us. I don't know about you, but Biden's speech that night sounded to me more or less like the definition of a government effort to discourage people from leaving their homes. There's another word for that. 8 letters, starts with L, ends N. I'll remember eventually. Of course, the blue checks want to tell you that they're just following the science in their new devotion to freedom. The science has changed. Dr. Leanna Wen actually said so out loud, bless her heart. The science has changed in only one meaningful way in the last year, plus the mRNA jabs look worse on an almost daily basis. But the uselessness of masks and lockdowns, the problems with school closing, COVID's lack of risk to kids, we have known all that almost since the epidemic began. In fact, what's amazing is how little, not how much, has changed about the epidemiology of COVID in the last 2 years. I know, I have the receipts. And he has an urgent update. New research turns up yet more potential mRNA vaccine dangers. mRNA from the Pfizer and Moderna shots can be found in lymph nodes for at least 60 days after injection. Free-floating spike proteins circulate at high levels in the blood after vaccination. Vaccinated people infected with variants of SARS-CoV-2 produce antibodies biased toward the original and now extinct variant rather than the one that has actually infected them. Conspiracy theories from Dr. Kennedy Mercola's We Hate Vaccines Digest? No. Findings from a preprint in Cell, among the world's leading scientific journals. Almost 50 researchers worldwide collaborated on the work, which Cell released online 2 weeks ago. The preprint has received little attention, possibly because it discusses the potential implications of its findings only obliquely. In discussing the fact that the mRNA hamper the immune response to new variants, the researchers offer extra doses as a potential solution. For example, okay. Reminds me of the old days. When if you asked socialists or communists about the failures of socialism or communism, what's the solution? And the answer invariably came back, more socialism or more communism. Similarly, failures of globalism. Got any ideas how to ameliorate this? More globalism. Why, of course. Keep doing the thing that doesn't work. That's the sensible response. A quick look at dailyskeptic.org. Number of people waiting a year for NHS treatment rises 200-fold since before pandemic. And a lot of those people are going to die while waiting for treatment. And deaths 9% below average. When will the government declare the pandemic over? We aren't political. We are the working class. Freedom Convoy truckers respond to government smears of far-right links. And let's talk about Eric Zemmour. I wondered, I asked today on Twitter, could we clone him and have one of him in every Western country? This is from Paul Joseph Watson at Summit News. French presidential candidate Eric Zemmour, who wants a complete halt on immigration, said he was not the Santa Claus of humankind when pressed on how many refugees France should take in, adding that he was here to save the French people and France, not here to save the world. Yeah, meanwhile, the Trudeau government has promised that Canada is going to take, 30,000 so-called refugees from Afghanistan. I wonder whether they will prioritize gay Afghan refugees, just as it's prioritized gay Iranians. That was Jason Kenney, by the way, who boasted about all the gay Iranians that he had arranged to come to Canada. The firebrand intellectual made the comments during a debate aired by the French broadcaster BMF TV. The host of the debate asked Zemmour what the criteria would be for migrants and refugees to be able to attain asylum in France. Zemmour responded by saying the migrant should make the appeal in his own country and that if he came to France before doing so, he should be arrested and deported. He was then asked what type of person should France accept as an asylum seeker. He responded, quote, "Originally, the right of asylum is for freedom fighters like Victor Hugo, Solzhenitsyn, etc." "That's not a lot," said the host. "Exactly. We will stop there," Zemmour responded. The candidate then pointed to the example of Japan, which only accepts a relatively minuscule number of refugees on a year-by-year basis. Zemmour said he would go back to 1950s numbers when France accepted only around 300 refugees a year. The host then asked if Zemmour would take in persecuted Afghan women fleeing the Taliban. "Afghan women are not freedom fighters. I do not accept them," he responded. "I am not the Santa Claus of humankind. Individuals belong to peoples. They have histories, cultures. I am neither here to give moral lessons to 7 billion men, nor to welcome all the misery and all the misfortunes of the world. I close. It's over." The host then tried to trip up Zemmour by asking if he would allow a migrant who had saved a child from a burning building to stay in France, but the intellectual wasn't having any of it. "Oh, how do I get into France? Set fire to a building." "Would you naturalize this man?" "No." So this man saves a child. Very good. And you send him back to Bamako by plane? Absolutely. Zemmour said, "I have a duty of humanity to the French people. I have no duty of humanity towards the whole world. I'm here to save the French people in France. I'm not here to save the world." He added, warning that mass immigration was changing the face of France and that migrants were colonizing the country. Zemmour's political opponents, such as right-wing populist Marine Le Pen, have tried to smear him as an extremist. Oh dear. She's the gatekeeper now of France? However, his sentiments are shared by a significant proportion of the French population. A recent poll by Harris revealed that the majority of French people are concerned about European, white, and Christian populations being threatened with extinction as a result of Muslim immigration. And, let's talk about Joe Rogan. I don't know. I wish that he'd never apologized, because he must have seen this coming. Each time you apologize, there are demands for further apologies and, demands that you disappear forever. This is Steve Watson at Summit News, free speech video platform Rumble has offered Joe Rogan $100 million to ditch Spotify and join them, promising to leave his content completely uncensored. In an open letter, Rumble CEO Chris Pavlovsky said, quote, "We stand with you, your guests, and your legion of fans in desire for real conversation. So we'd like to offer you 100 million reasons to make the world a better place. How about you bring all your shows to Rumble, both old and new, with no censorship for 100 million bucks over 4 years? This is our chance to save the world. And yes, this is totally legit," unquote. I suspect that there is a non-compete clause in the contract that he signed with Spotify. I suspect that there's a clause in his contract with Spotify that gives Spotify the right to remove any episodes of the Joe Rogan Experience for any reason whatsoever. And Andrew Yang, didn't he run for president? Am I imagining this, that Andrew Yang ran for president? Well, he is very, very sorry. He is very, very sorry about Joe Rogan. Not because of what Joe Rogan had said on old podcasts, by what Andrew Yang said about Joe Rogan. He had tweeted, "I don't think Joe Rogan is a racist. The man interacts with and works with Black people literally all of the time. Do I know Black friends of Joe's who would swear by him? Yes, I do." Yang then tweeted, "I like to believe the best of people, especially if I've met and spent time with that person. Sometimes it makes me miss something. I think we should have the capacity to forgive people, whether a podcaster or a mayor, if they mess up. Maybe it's because I mess up too. Racism is deep, real, corrosive, and even lethal. I know that. I made a mistake in an earlier tweet tonight that downplayed these realities. I deleted the tweet because it was wrong-headed. It also hurt people, which is never my intent. I'm sorry. I'm learning and appreciate those who reached out to express their feelings. I like to believe the work I've done these past few years had the goal of uplifting everyone, particularly those on the outside looking in for any reason, be it poverty or marginalization or race. I've always wanted to help those with the least the most. I'm going to keep doing all I can for a more fair, equitable, and a just country. That means for everyone, universal basic income, democracy reform, and unity are how we get there." Oh my God. I mean, Spotify has Joe Rogan over a barrel. Who has Andrew Yang over a barrel? It just sounds to me that he's a coward. Oh, he wants to learn and grow. Well, don't we all? And oh yeah, I want to talk about content. And at Red Letter Media, they had an over hour-long video, and it's about Bruce Willis. This was a shock to me. This was a shocker, no question, that he has made 11 movies over the past 2 years. 11 movies. And they all stink. And I learned from this podcast that apparently because of an explosion in the first Die Hard movie, he lost 75% of hearing in one ear. But you can see an earpiece in his other ear during many of these movies. And they're feeding him lines. He doesn't really appear much in these films, but he's not going to memorize the lines. And it's speculated that he spends, two days on the set, and while paying, the lion's share of the budget for these movies goes to Bruce Willis, because he used to be a big movie star and he used to be able to act. I've seen him good in several movies. They went so far in one of these movies as to use some sort of technique, a scope technique or whatever, to remove the hearing aid or to remove the sight of it. And it left like a black hole where it would be. Spooky. And they show lots of clips of these movies. And no, they're not going to show muzzle fires, right? So you have CGI and it looks terrible. They're not going to use squibs uh, because they're expensive. So this is digitally created as well, you know, wounds, gunshot wounds. The flamethrower is not a flamethrower. And Bruce Willis, oh yeah, shaky cam. Lots and lots of shaky cam because, as I said, it's supposed to be one of them is supposed to be a gritty cop movie. So you have these scenes of people walking slowly down a hall. You couldn't use a tripod for that. Do you need to be shaking the camera all around to show a man slowly walking down a hall? And Bruce Willis, what does he do in these movies? He spends a lot of time sitting in chairs, or alternatively, leaning against trees in the forest, or sitting down in front of a tree in the forest. Why? To smoke a cigar. And how did he come by the cigar? I mean, he's not wearing a jacket, and you put a cigar in your pants, it's going to get crushed. Well, a cigar in perfectly good condition, pristine, one might say, just happened to be very close to a tree in the forest. Because, if you leave a cigar outdoors, it's not going to degrade. Oh, no, no, no. Also, a lighter, of course, in perfect working condition. So Bruce Willis picks up the cigar and the lighter, heads over to the tree, sits down, leans against the tree, and enjoys a good smoke. Now, that's what we want to see in movies. Right? It's been pointed out by others, but there seem to be only two kinds of movies made now. There's the ones that cost hundreds of millions of dollars, and then there are the cheap jack movies. And all of these Bruce Willis movies, they have, I don't know, 6, 8, 10 or more different companies listed at the beginning, because that's how many different investors they got. So yeah, we have the blockbuster superhero movies, and we have the cheap jack movies, and nothing in between, it's not good for the art of movie making. You all know Lifetime, right? You all love it, right? It's movies made for women, typically of the stranger danger genre. I was bored a couple of days ago, and I noticed, I turned around like this, the TV's over there, and I noticed something spectacularly bad was unfolding. So I started watching it, and what the Lifetime channel in Canada, they replay everything. Of course, they do that in Canada all the time. Yeah, we'll show the show, and then we'll show it again a few hours later. We'll have, 2 blocks of Frasier, and then The Office, or whatever, and then we'll repeat it a few hours later. I guess it's too expensive to buy more shows. Anyway, the one that I watched is called Her Deadly Groom. Recent divorcee Allison, Kate Watson, is nervous about jumping back into the dating pool. When her best friend sets her up on a dating site, Allison is matched with Vincent, Michael Dvorzan, a mysterious man who appears too good to be true. Will Allison uncover the truth about Vincent's motives before it's too late? No. No, she will not. Allison is an idiot. Now, I assume that the women that are cast in these movies are cast for a specific reason. They're typically middle-aged, and they're not particularly good-looking. That means that they're aspirational, because apparently, I don't know, North American women are increasingly disdainful of good-looking women, because it makes them feel the sads, This guy, Vincent Black, he calls himself. He is, I should mention that Kate's best friend, she's the less good-looking one. Okay, yeah, I get it. Oh, and she's man-hungry as well. Okay, so this guy gives off this horrible, creepy vibe right from the very beginning. I mean, starting with that quasi-beard that he has. He's also mustache-twirlingly evil. And I love the cliche where I'm going to kill you. But first, I'm going to have to explain to you just how fiendish my evil plan is. He says this before he murders Eric Roberts. Yep, Eric Roberts is in this. He doesn't play the heavy. He's just killing up a storm. And apparently none of these murders are investigated. We learned that Vincent Black is supposed to be some sort of high-flying businessman, but he has no web presence. Anyone with an IQ over about 95 would understand, just with that one fact, that he's not for real, right? Okay, to give you an example of just how stupid this movie is, he finds a house on the market, and it's more like a castle than a house, right? And he pretends to be interested in the house, and he starts flirting with the real estate agent, who is actually better looking than Allison. And it's just like, oh, yeah, I just met you, but now my hands are going to be all over you, and you're going to dig that because that's what women are like, right? Yeah, that happened. And so he comes up with this plan that the owners of the house, they're away in Europe for quite some time, and the house has been on the market, and there's been little interest, so he could probably buy it at a fire sale price. No, he has a different idea. He's simply going to move in and take Allison with him and her daughter. And so they move in, they go up to the master bedroom and have intercourse, and they come back downstairs, and Allison's in the kitchen, and the real estate agent checks in on her house and says, "Who the hell are you?" And so Vincent shows up, and we can discuss this outside, right? So they go outside, and he snaps her neck, just like that. We're supposed to believe that this guy is like trained by SEAL Team 6. Not only that, but he has the world's best hacker skills, and he can hack anything, right? It's one of those movies where someone's at a computer and tap, 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 tap. Now I know where he lives. Tap, 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 tap. Oh, here's his bank statements. Tap, 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 tap. All that information. I mean, apparently that's available to anyone, right? Or at least the men in Lifetime movies. Typical of these movies are that evil men have superhuman computing powers. Oh, yeah, and they're just going to put, little tiny cameras all around the house, and they're going to be constantly surveilling inside because that's, these are wireless cameras, right? Which I expect would be very expensive, right? But apparently, I don't know, you go to a Best Buy and you can get them for just a few bucks, right? So he's killed the real estate agent, and then we see him put the body in the trunk, and then he drives away. And then we see him come back into the kitchen. And, okay, what happened to the body? All right. No, we're not going to get into that, right? When a real estate agent disappears, people notice because, they're always going into the office, calling the office to check in. And when that stops, someone's going to notice. But apparently no one notices in this. And his fiendish plan is he's taken out a life insurance policy on Allison, a big one, and he's a beneficiary, and that he's going to murder her. There's this, he murders a notary public. We find this out in the beginning, and he's stolen his seal maker, right? And because, if you got that, then you can do anything, right? You don't have to file documents, right? But the boyfriend of the daughter is suspicious, and he does a lot of staring like this. Yeah, he's onto him. Points out he's got no internet presence. Yeah, okay. Okay, Mom, you've been told this twice, and you can't understand what this means? And yeah, just this. Okay, so eventually he's going to kill Allison, and they're in the bathroom, and she's in the tub, and there's this bit where he's constantly stealing other people's phones or hacking other people's phones because that's a thing that everyone does, right? Oops, I dropped your smartphone in the bathtub. Now you can't hear the frantic message from your daughter. He drugs the boyfriend to make him appear to be a druggie. Apparently he used to be, but isn't anymore. And then does it again, and he's going to blame the boyfriend for the murder. He's left blood all over the boyfriend's apartment, by the way. He's left his fingerprints on everything, you know. But anyway, so a hairdryer, she's being choked, and instead of, he's got a knife and could slit her throat, but no, he decides to choke her instead, which gives Allison the time to grasp for a hairdryer, turn it on, throw it in the bath, and electrocute him. But guess what? He's not dead. And in the chilling final scene of the movie, we see him in prison, and he tells one prisoner to a cell. Ooh, that's a very special American prison, I must say. And so he makes his weekly phone call, and he calls some woman, obviously, and claims his name is Joey. And he's going to be seeing her closer than you would imagine, because the police are not going to say, there's been an awful lot of deaths that are proximate to this man. We're not going to investigate any of those and, put you in prison for life plus 99 years or something like that, because this guy is like a superhero. But women love these movies. No question about it. And okay, your browser is up to date, which means that the link that I'd saved, it doesn't work anymore. Okay, yeah, maybe it doesn't. That's unfortunate. Maybe I could arrange for this not to happen while I'm doing a live stream. Okay, so this problem of movies being unbelievable and featuring people, with superhuman powers, it's not just Lifetime movies or cheap jack movies like the kinds that Bruce Willis makes now. I happened to find on TV, I don't know, I felt like watching a movie and not a sitcom. And I don't have any movie channels, but there's some channels that play a movie occasionally. And this one was called Untraceable, described by Wikipedia as a 2008 American psychological thriller film directed by Gregory Hoblit and starring Diane Lane, used to be a big star, Colin Hanks, Billy Burke, and Joseph Cross. Set in Portland, Oregon, the film involves a serial killer who rigs contraptions that kill his victims based on the number of hits received by a website, killwithme.com, that features a live streaming video of the victim. Millions of people log on, hastening the victim's death. So it's an obvious ripoff of Seven, which was objectionable, very objectionable. This movie is objectionable and stupid. Okay. The killer, he comes up with these amazingly sadistic ways of killing people. Okay. And which is all in his basement. And you look at it and you think, where did he get all these toys? Where did he get this stuff? How did he put it? Oh, apparently when he was a kid, he used to build stuff with his father. Okay. But the fellow who plays the murderer, the actor is called Joseph Cross. Okay. And this guy's lack of affect and creepiness is completely off the charts. And so there's a scene where he's decided to kill a news reporter, and he places an ad that he has antique train set, cars, locomotives, whatever, for sale. Apparently good prices, because, you can single out a single person for this, right? That's how advertising works. It's become very personal. So he walks into the kitchen, and this Joseph Cross fellow is just sending out these totally demented vibes, such that, someone like a news reporter who interacts with a lot of people he'd walk into the kitchen, exchange a few words, and then he'd grab his phone, out of his pocket or whatever and said, I just got a text. My house is on fire. Bye. Gotta go. But no, he doesn't do that. He just walks stupidly to his torture and death. Oh, and here's the kicker. It turns out that this movie is supposed to be a scathing examination of voyeurism in films. Been done before in Psycho or in Michael Powell's Peeping Tom. Those are actually good movies on this subject. But, there's things that happen in films which are unlikely, but you have to put the work in. Okay? Let's look at Breaking Bad. The details of the train heist are all explained. They're all shown. We know precisely how it's going to be done, and then we see it being done, and it's great. I don't know whether it's possible to do something like that, but it looks believable. Now, there's a big payoff because, Jesse Pinkman is in love with magnets, right? How about if they use magnets to destroy the contents of an evidence locker? Well, let's test it out, okay, with giant magnets. And so when the scene happens, it's believable and exciting. Let's see. One of my favorite movies, the Day of the Jackal, right? We see the details of the plan unfold, but we don't know what the plan is. The Jackal, he's making something, but we don't know what it is. Enough is hidden from us, and we keep being shown different people providing different services and him learning different techniques. And in the last 15 minutes of the movie, it's revealed, and the audience goes, "Oh," it's very pleasurable. Now I know, there's some movies which are obviously fantasy. Let's look at Goldfinger. That scene where this incredible model comes up from under the floor, right? And no one asked the question, because you don't ask questions about a movie like this. Where did that come from? Did Goldfinger, make a phone call? Hello? Is this evil millwrights? Yes, it is. How may we help you today? Yeah, I've got a high-tech super secret project for you. It's going to have to be a small team, and you're all sworn to secrecy forever, because if any of you talks, I'm going to have to kill you. In fact, I'm going to kill you anyway, but are you up for the job? We are up for the job. Is that how it happened? But again, you don't object to that sort of thing in a James Bond film, because it is not supposed to be real. Oh, yes, more entertainment news. There's a woman that I've been aware of for some time. She's this ugly Asian woman called Nora Lum, but she calls herself Aquafina, like the bottled water. Get it? And someone decided that this woman was going to become a star, but now she's in big, big trouble, because like a lot of Americans who are not Black, they pretend to be. This is from Jessica Bennett at the New York Post, page 6. Aquafina addresses criticism over her black scent, quits Twitter. After years of being called out for using a black scent, Asian American actress Aquafina, born Nora Lum, has addressed criticism of a usage of African American Vernacular English, or AAVE. In a letter shared via Twitter yesterday, the 33-year-old Golden Globe winner acknowledged the historical context of the African American community in this country, writing, "And in life, linguistic acculturation, immigrant acculturation, and the inevitable passage of globalized internet slang all play a factor in the fine line between offense and pop culture. But as a non-Black POC, I stand by the fact that I will always listen and work tirelessly to understand the history and context of AAVE, what is deemed appropriate or backwards towards the progress of any and every marginalized group. But I must emphasize, to mock, belittle, or be unkind in any way possible at the expense of others is simply, period, not period, my period, nature, period. It never has, and it never was." How about this, Aquafina? You're already a minority, but you're not one of those minorities that routinely fails in America. So you pretend vocally to be a different minority, one that, makes a lot less money, has less years of schooling or whatever. What, for sympathy? I don't know. Seems rather contemptible, actually. Black people have their culture, which is not your culture. Apparently, did you know that that not everyone in Hollywood is a nice person? I know, I was shocked too. This is from Laura Bradley at the Daily Beast. How did Death on the Nile become such a publicity nightmare? Kenneth Branagh's Murder on the Orient Express. Oh, yeah, it had Johnny Depp in it. Ooh, but Death on the Nile seems downright noxious. Let's see, who's it got in? Oh, yeah. It's got Armie Hammer, Russell Brand, and Letitia Wright. Okay, Armie Hammer was supposed to have knocked women around. He denies it. And what's the problem with Russell Brand? Yeah, apparently he's a vaccine skeptic. I don't care what the people in movies, how they feel about vaccines. I don't care. Oh, apparently Letitia Wright has also come under fire for promoting anti-vax views amid the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic. Oh dear, oh dear, oh dear. I was a fan of Paul Newman, like many, many people, and I knew that he was pretty hardcore liberal. I don't care. I just don't care. But apparently we all have to care now. And in other racial justice news, this is from justthenews.com. The Biden administration is funding crack pipe distribution, saying it's needed for racial equity. It's not a joke story, by the way. And from the New York Post, Craig McCarthy, New York Mayor Eric Adams apologized Friday after an old clip resurfaced where the mayor was recorded saying he was a superior cop compared to his cracker colleagues during his time in the New York City Police Department. Every day in the police department, I kicked those crackers' ass. Now, Mayor Adams says in the video at a private Harlem Business Alliance event in 2019. 2019? Why, that was 3 years ago. It's not one of those, I was a teenager or it was a long time ago. No, this was, 2.5 years ago, a little more than 2 years or whatever. Man, I was unbelievable in the police department with 100 blacks in law enforcement, Adams said. I became a sergeant, a lieutenant, and a captain. You know the story. Some people all of a sudden trying to reinvent me, but the reality is that what I was then is who I am now. I'm called again, Adams continues, saying that he'd rather grow a beard, smoke some weed, and leave this stuff alone. You hear me? These Negroes that wake every day and don't like themselves, they're going to beat me up. The people who say, where's our real black leaders? They're going to say, who's Eric? Why does Eric think he should be mayor? Well, Negro, you run. Go raise the $7 million. Golly, this person doesn't seem to like white people very much. He also seems to be quite full of himself, I must say. And, okay. Oh, Rihanna is in the news because she is pregnant with somebody called ASAP Rocky. It was a dollar sign in his name. The HuffPost is not pleased about this. Rihanna seems delighted by her new status. It's great we're celebrating Rihanna's pregnancy, but here's what's being left out. Oh, come on, Paul, please tell me. It's unusual for America to celebrate a black woman's pregnancy. Is it? Is it really? Malcolm X. Let's bring in Malcolm X, who has a lot to do with Rihanna, apparently. Black Lives Matter, George Floyd. My daughter, Reign, R-E-I-G-N, because of course, was born on Juneteenth, Black People's Independence Day, which is now a national holiday. It wasn't at the time. Juneteenth is the day, yes, of course it wasn't. Juneteenth is the day we commemorate emancipation from slavery. You know that Rihanna's not American, right? She's from the Caribbean. No, but apparently Tiara Stewart, who is, she's not a very good looking woman, and she doesn't have Rihanna's figure, to put it mildly. But she seems to be upset that Rihanna is happy. Shouldn't she be pleased? That a prominent black woman who now lives in America, is delighted with her pregnancy. Shouldn't she? Oh, yes. And I came across from Libs of TikTok, a Showtime documentary series. Warning. This trailer may trigger white people. Uh-oh. And there's a bunch of people, none of whom I recognize, and they're all black. And, white people are crybabies, because it's, white fragility, not black fragility. Oh, from director Sasha Jenkins. I don't know who she is. And it's just a whole bunch. Oh, comes a new jammy. Oh, and there's some Muslim woman in it wearing a hijab. And white people, they suck, right? White people, don't you just hate them? White people, boo. Yeah. That's the whole thing. And it's a series. Oh, and they've got Donald Trump hugging the American flag because the American flag, oh, Thanksgiving dinner, those are both racist symbols, right? But what I was struck by was the music, which introduced the clip. And I thought, I recognize that tune. It's the overture from the opera La Nozze di Figaro, which was written by a German, Mozart, and an Italian, De Ponte. Do these people even know who Mozart was? Can they spell cultural appropriation? If you hate white people so much, leave our music alone. Why don't you get the soundtrack made by Lil MC Purpa Drank or whatever? Well, let's go back to the chat. I'm going to be moving to talk about Abba in a little while, but I got to keep up with the chat here. Hang on. Points out that Rihanna is from Barbados, however you pronounce it. Apparently, she was sent to America when she was 12 years old or whatever, and coached for years and years before she was unleashed as a sure thing on the music world. I was listening to Winner Takes It All yesterday, says David Denome. It's a very sad song, like so many ABBA songs. Pete Bauman says classic projection. Is New York City hollowed out enough for that? David Denome says dingo tamer. They're going to miss Giuliani, broken window, stop and frisk before long. I think they already are. New York City is busily bringing Portland-style dysfunction. It says David the Gnome. Okay. So white folks can't say y'all except for Southerners. When I hear Canadians saying y'all, it raises my ire. To live and die in LA is great with details, said Paul Casso 88. Indeed, it is. Cool thing about that movie is that, in the original, in the novel, they're going to steal all this gold. And I forget who it was who pointed out, maybe the screenwriter, that, do you know how heavy gold is? Do you know how many hours or days it would take to empty out Fort Knox? So then they came up with the idea of irradiating the gold instead. I don't know that they would make any practical difference because it's still gold, right? But no, it's much more realistic than the movies. Lots of electricians and engineers employed at Evil Co, says Dingo Tamer. Super villain logistics are pretty impressive, says Dr. A Dead Name. Is Kevin saying he doesn't believe a 5'5" 115-pound woman can kick ass, says Palpcasso 88? No, I don't. But if you watch YouTube videos, you find out that a lot of women believe this. They've been, taught to believe this is true. And you can see them, say, on subways. And I don't know, they form some aversion to some black man and they just start wailing on him. And it's not very powerful. And in a lot of these videos, the guy brings the back of his hand or sometimes his fist, and that's it. The fight's over. Hello to Oscar Toe. No, Kevin, the evil genius always has an incompetent henchman assigned to watch the monitors who gets distracted or needs a smoke break or something. Have you ever seen Boxing Helena, says Chocokin 666? No, and I'm not going to. And even the very idea of it, I know what it's about. And of course, Julian Sands doesn't look absolutely deranged in every movie he's ever been in. Okay. So, William Hicks, sounds like the producers working with Willis need to locate Roger Corman. I'm glad you brought that up because they talk about Roger Corman. Roger Corman made a lot of cheapy movies. And, of course, his Edgar Allan Poe adaptations are really quite good. To go wrong when you have Vincent Price in your film. But the Roger Corman movies were typically low budget, but they were funny. Okay, they were funny. I mean, that's where, Joe Dante learned the craft. And, I love Roger Corman simply for being responsible for Rock and Roll High School. That alone would do it, Like I get, the movie within the movie and matinee is called Mant, and you can find the whole thing on YouTube. It's absolutely hilarious. It's got William Shallard in it, one of those old pros that Dante loves working with so much. And so they're watching Mant in this movie theater on Key West, and they've got Kevin McCarthy, another old pro who Joe Dante loves. And he's talking about the man who's turned into an ant, and it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And his wife says that Kathy Moriarty says, he's just a shoe salesman, And Kevin McCarthy, who plays the top general who's supposed to kill Mant, says, would you want that fitting you with a pump? And there's all the kids in the audience. And this kid who, he's the expert, on military stuff. And he says to the kid sitting next to him, a real general wouldn't say that. And the other kid says, shut up, which is absolutely hilarious because that's absolutely what a real kid would say. Piranha, says Dingo Tamer. I watched it. Yes, Piranha is hilarious. And his spoof of the, the feel good movement, the werewolf movie he made, that is hilarious, also really scary, and it's also, a satire of Northern California. Okay. Let's, briefly, I want to talk about this because it made me laugh. But this was trending. Dear Brian was trending on Twitter, and I always like to see what's trending on Twitter. I mean, lots of stuff you can figure out, right? But this one I couldn't. I mean, there's lots of well-known people called Brian. Even Marilyn Manson is called Brian. Brian Warner, that's his actual name. Brian's not really a good name for, like a shock rocker, devil worshiper, Brian. Too funny. Anyway, so Brian Sauvé, it describes himself on Twitter as a Christian pastor, husband, father of 5, and classical school founder, making music for the new Christendom at patreon.com. So he had a hot take about women, thirsty women. And basically, stop giving your life away. Dear ladies, there is no reason whatsoever for you to post pictures of yourself in low-cut shirts, bikinis, bra, and underwear, or anything similar ever. Not to show your weight loss journey, not to show your newborn baby, not to document your birth story. Signed, your brothers. Now, of course, that chipmunk-cheeked former model who's now famous for being drunk and stupid on Instagram, Chrissy Teigen. Yeah, let's show everyone in the world multiple pictures of your stillborn baby. I don't care that it's wrapped up in a blanket. Why would you do that? Why would anyone do that? Well, I know, because they're thirsty. Oh, and people are furious with Pastor Sauvé. And a lot of those people who are furious have rainbow flags or trans flags next to their name. No one cares about your effing opinion, said Nicole Lay, sorry. Oh, Anthony Walker, Captain Canada, said, dear men, don't be a Brian. A lot of standing going on. And Brian Sauvé, notice this. No one cares what you think, says Robin McCleary. Dear Brian, I mean this with all disrespect. Shut the F up. Dear Brian, oh, apparently we have someone who agrees. M.K. Martin, who is passionate about stories, especially spec fic, or perhaps fanfic, or slash fiction. M.K. Martin replies, there is never any reason to tell a woman how to dress. We are adults. We're capable of making our own choices based on the weather and our personal preferences. Our bodies do not exist for your pleasure or to be critiqued by you. Feck directly off, sincerely. And there's a picture, I presume it's of this woman, and she's holding a book which has been mocked up to read, When Did I Ask for This Man's Opinion? A mystery novel. And she's wearing, problem glasses, huge oversized glasses, and she has a ring through her septum. like a beast of burden. And and someone has put a picture of a cat. Apparently, this cat doesn't like Brian Sauvé. Oh, it's too funny. Oh yeah, male fragility, right? Oh, it's males that are fragile. Are they really? That's the reason why when a woman says, "Do I look fat in this dress?" or "Do I look fat in these pants?" the man says, "No," because if he, were to tell the truth, she'd be liable to burst into tears, and most men find that distressing. Okay, just let me check something here. Let me check something here. I'm waiting for something to be updated. I've written a piece, an editorial piece, which is going to be published, on VDARE, or at least it's supposed to be. This doesn't look good, because they have a piece by James Kirkpatrick called "Could Trucker Populism Create a New North American Nation?" Because the piece that I wrote was about the truckers and how their protest led to the defenestration of Aaron O'Toole. I don't know that they're going to publish two pieces on the same theme on the same day. I hope it doesn't get spiked. Anyway, if it gets spiked, I'll read it to you anyway. In fact, if it gets published, I'll read it to you. But let's talk about something happier, which is Abba, the Swedish pop group, who, of course, everyone knows this, but I'm going to repeat it. The name comes from the Christian names of the four members of the band: Agnetha Fältskog, Björn Ulvaeus, Benny Andersson, and Anna-Frid Lyngstam. They are often described as a Swedish group, but that is not exactly true. Anna-Frid is not Swedish at all. She is half Norwegian and half German. Her mother was a Norwegian woman who was knocked up by a German soldier during the German occupation of Norway. And after World War II, the retaliation against such women had become so savage that her family fled to Sweden. Now, the most interesting thing to me about Abba is that they were pretty much starting from zero, because the rock tradition in Sweden, it didn't really exist. Apparently, one of the seminal events in rock history, or pre-rock history in Sweden, was a tour that Jimi Hendrix made, where everyone thought, wow, someone can make music like that. Someone can, look like this. Not that Abba were outrageous or anything, although their costumes were cute. And Agnetha, what did she won the Rear of the Year designation in Britain after Waterloo. But they had been in, they'd had solo careers, were successful, and they had been in groups. And let's see, Benny and Bjorn were in a group called the Hep Stars, which is pretty funny, actually. And another group that the band was associated with was the Hootenanny Singers. Bjorn was in that. So we see, the same thing happened in America and in Canada and in Britain. Folk music. Let's rediscover folk music, and we'll tart it up for the pop charts. And then after Dylan went electric, this folk music is rather passé. So we're going to move back into, pop music. But Abba, a union of these four individuals, and they were, I don't know, I suppose you could say they were rather ropey when they began. what happened is that Stig Anderson, who owned the music company that they were signed to in the studio, Polar Music, very clever man, thought that Abba could become the biggest band in the world. And in addition, he wrote the English words for many of their songs, including, let's see, Ring Ring Waterloo, Honey Honey, I Do, I Do, I Do, I Do, Mamma Mia, SOS, Dancing Queen, Knowing Me, Knowing You, and The Name of the Game. He later became, like many people, like Ingmar Bergman. Sweden seems to have a problem with people who are too successful. They need to be cut down to size. And Bergman was forced to flee to Germany at one point because the taxman was after him, and the taxman was after Stig as well. But so Bjorn and Benny decided that they were going to investigate all forms of popular music, around the world. And so that's what they did. And if you listen to their albums, starting with Ring Ring, which came out in 1973, you see them assimilating all of these different forms. Let's see, the titles give you an idea of this lyrically. It's pretty ropey. Another town, another train. People need love. Yeah, I've heard that too. I saw it in the mirror. Nina, pretty ballerina. Love isn't easy, but sure is hard enough. Me and Bobby's brother. He is your brother. I am just a girl. And rock and roll band. As a rule, I don't like songs that have the words rock and roll in them. Perhaps the Velvet Underground song. That's a good one. But there are so many songs with rock and roll in them, or even rock, and they tend to be bad. By the time we move on to Waterloo, they had gotten a lot better. But again, Stig, he writes the words for Waterloo, but his and for Honey Honey, which was a minor hit. They're the joke songs like, What About Livingston, and Gonna Give You My Love Song. It's very, very generic. They hadn't really carved out their own style, lyrical style. But by the time you get to their album, Abba, the album, this is where the breakthrough really comes. And it's got a lot of hits on it. Mamma Mia, SOS, I Do, I Do, I Do. And you see a greater involvement of Stig Anderson, and you see a much greater musical sophistication. The use of their studio, their perfectionism. And, Abba's asked about, outtakes. Well, there aren't any. There aren't any Abba outtakes because of the enormous amount of time and attention that went into making their music. So they weren't going to work on something and not put it on an album, right? But I want to talk about the song Hey, Hey, Helen, which is the second track on the Abba album. And it's really good, but it is also really, really strange. Because glam rock was huge in Britain at the time. And this song, Hey, Hey, Helen, is a glam rock stomper. But then, I don't know, they've been listening to, black music from America as well. So we get this break. We get this break in the song, and there's the funky Fender Rhodes piano, electric piano in there. And it is such a jarring juxtaposition. And the words, golly, I guess they're controversial. They'd be considered controversial now. So at last you're free. It's the way you wanted it to be and the price you paid to become a woman of today. Is it worth the pain to see the children cry? Does it hurt when they ask for daddy? Hey, hey, Helen, now you live on your own. Hey, hey, Helen, can you make it alone? So you're free at last and beginning to forget the past. Does it make you sad when you think about the life you had? Hey, hey, Helen, now you live on your own. Hey, hey, Helen, can you make it alone? Don't you know what to do? Seems to be an anti-divorce song, doesn't it? And it's actually blaming the woman for the divorce, for desertion. They flipped that actually, or it became ambiguous in their later heartbreaking songs. I should mention that the shoegazer band Lush did a cover of it on their album Gala, which is really quite good. And that's a female-led band, so kudos to them for recording it. But I was going to mention SOS. I loved Waterloo when it came out, and Eurovision Song Contest, and that's normally pretty dire, right? And this was a delightful surprise. And then it seemed like Abba had disappeared. And then when SOS became a hit in 1975, I thought, could it be that pop music is making a comeback? Because what you have in the early 70s? You had the plague of singer-songwriters, women with long hair and serious expressions, and men with long hair and beards and serious expression. And you had just, junk like the Eagles and Bad Company and boogie, lots and lots of boogie. And this was pop music, unashamed pop music. And SOS is, it's one of their greatest songs. And it has a video, a delightful video. And of course, Abba made videos for a great many of their songs. And they had the tremendous advantage of hiring, well, before he became famous, one of Sweden's best filmmakers. And you can find collections on DVD of Abba videos, and I highly recommend them. The videos became more elaborate in later years, and let's see, Arrival came out in 1976, and big hits. Dancing Queen, Dancing Queen is great, but I remember hearing it and thinking it's a shame that ABBA didn't come out before the disco era or came out after the disco era, because ABBA wanted to be popular and disco was popular. So ABBA did disco. Now, I suppose you could say they made the best disco, but I would have liked it unadorned. Money, Money, Money. I would say you get almost a Brechtian alienation in that song. And, it's a woman who wants to be rich, and she's going to do whatever it takes to get rich. Yeah, Lasse Hallström is he's the fellow who made the ABBA videos. And the song is, she's a strong woman and she's willing to do what it takes, but it's very sad, and we see this introduction of, sadness into ABBA's songs. Knowing Me, Knowing You, which of course inspired Alan Partridge, the show, Knowing Me, Knowing You, and his famous catchphrase, aha. And that is a very, very, it's a remarkably mature song for a pop group, and it's, of course, the story of ABBA, that one of the men was married to one of the women, and one of the other men was married to one of the other women, and they both divorced. And of course, Bjorn and Benny, the songwriters, would claim that no, these songs are nothing about the divorce, but obviously, that is obviously not true. And let's take a look at the lyrics here for "Knowing Me, Knowing You." Genius lyrics. I think that's the best site. No more carefree laughter, silence ever after, walking through an empty house, tears in my eyes. Here is where the story ends. This is goodbye. Knowing me, knowing you, there is nothing we can do. We just have to face it. This time we're through. Breaking up is never easy, I know, but I have to go. Knowing me, knowing you, it's the best I can do. Memories, good days, bad days, they'll be with me always. In these old familiar rooms, children would play. Now there's only emptiness, nothing to say. That is pretty dark for a top 10 hit, wouldn't you say? And of course, Abba, around this time, they were just this incredible string of number one hits in Britain. And again, by a rival, what Abba had it had the formula was perfected by this time. That's why I called them, I labeled this segment the music machine, because again, we want to be popular. We're talented songwriters, but what are the pieces that you need to make successful songs? Or, what are the studio techniques that you need to make successful songs? Of course, it's difficult for anyone to say with any degree of accuracy how many records any band has sold, particularly in the pre-SoundScan era. But there's lots of countries that don't use SoundScan. But this figure of 320 million ABBA records has been tossed around. And of course, the musical Mamma Mia, made up of their songs, has been an enormous hit all over the world for years and years and years. So it's as if, ABBA has never stopped being popular. So the imaginatively named The Album appeared in 1977. And, the name of the game, another song about marital breakup. Their music had become, how would you say, stately by this time. But again, a song like "Take a Chance on Me," which is absolutely irresistible, is it's very simple lyrically, but again, I mean, you can't. It's such a it is such a toe tapper. It is such it is so catchy that it can't be denied. And oh yes, "Thank You for the Music," which is seen as a farewell song, appears on that album. And again, it's a song tinged with sadness. "Voulez-vous" came out in 1979. It see a 2-year gap there, which is kind of unusual for ABBA. But Agnetha at this time had, I guess she was showing signs that she was getting fed up with show business, of the constant traveling, of the, thousands of hours put in the studio. And she had a particular aversion to fame, as it turns out, which is rather difficult when you're one of the most famous women in the world. Later, she became, pretty much a hermit, And on "Voulez-vous," let's see, "Does Your Mother Know?" Which was unusual because, of course, Bjorn sang lead on that. another a great hit. And oh, Summer Nights, Gimme, 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 A Man After Midnight. Yeah. Bonus track on the album now. Super Trooper. Super Trooper is a kind of spotlight. You know, one of those big, very intense spotlights, which are used on stage shows. And on and on and on. There is that is, I think that is the hardest rocking song that Abba ever made. There's a video of it, and it's concert footage, you know, chopped up. It's not an organic video, but again, a very powerful song. And The Winner Takes It All, which of course Alan Partridge or Steve Coogan sang on one of his shows. You know, he took it seriously, whereas his traveling partner, the Welsh comic Bryden, he mocks it. He's always mocking these things, and it would seem that Steve Coogan, like Alan Partridge, has this. I mean, his love of Abba is not for show, you know. And but The Winner Takes It All, yes. And this suggestion of bitterness here, you know, that there are winners and losers in divorces. It's difficult, you know, to say. There's an ambiguity there about, you know, who's supposed to be the winner, who's supposed to be the loser. I don't want to talk about things we've gone through, though it's hurting me now. It's history. I played all my cards, and that's what you've done too. Nothing more to say, no more ace to play. The winner takes it all, the loser's standing small. Beside the victory, that's her destiny. I was in your arms, thinking I belonged there. I figured it made sense, building me a fence, building me a home, thinking I'd be strong there, but I was a fool playing by the rules. The gods may throw a dice, their minds as cold as ice, and someone way down here loses someone dear. The winner takes it all, the loser has to fall. It's simple and it's plain. Why should I complain? Stoicism. But tell me, does she kiss like I used to kiss you? Does it feel the same when she calls your name somewhere deep inside? You know, you must know I miss you. Well, what can I say? Rules must be obeyed. Yes, it's a heart-wrenching song, actually, which is difficult to, you know, pop music. You don't get much of that anymore. What you get is men expressing carnal desire for women, and women talking about, you know, love. And golly, there's been a tremendous regression of there, I have to say. The Visitors, which came out in 1981, is a concept album about Soviet dissidents, no less. Golly. And we have another breakup song, When All Is Said and Done. And oh, yeah, bonus track on the CD, Under Attack, which is pretty rocking, I must say. Abba reunited for an album in 2021 called Voyage. And apparently it's supposed to be some sort of virtual tour. None of them want to, you know, go through that again. You know, I remember there was a documentary that I watched years ago, a British documentary about Mamma Mia. And we see Benny. He's come to London to supervise a production. And we see him. He's got no minders. He's got no entourage. This is one of the most famous, you know, and presumably richest musicians in the world. And he travels by himself. And he stays in a, you know, boutique hotel. And he doesn't expect to be fawned over by anyone. It was just, wow. You can be as famous as him and be as nice as he is. It sort of, you know, reestablished my faith in humanity, given that, you know, so many people, particularly in the music business, are of the don't you know who I am type. But I suppose modesty comes naturally to Swedes. It's the better side of the tall poppies syndrome. Um, because these days most people appreciate ABBA through the greatest hits collections, and I mentioned the video collections. Oh yes, when I was in London in 1976, I adopted this pub on the Tottenham Court Road. It was called the Duke of Wellington. In those days, there were many, many pubs in Britain called the Duke of Wellington. They had two records, which they pretty much played, play the one record, then we're going to play the other record, and then we're going to go back to the first record. And the two records were ABBA's Greatest Hits, Volume 1, and the Eagles' Greatest Hits, number 1. So for me, it was like heaven and hell. ABBA Gold, Greatest Hits, is one of the best-selling records in history. And there's more ABBA Gold, more ABBA Hits, and they're both good. The most recent compilation is called Number Ones from 2006. All the records have been remastered. So they sound much better than they used to, and they come with extras. The definitive collection came out in 2001. That's all of ABBA's singles, and there is it's a 2 CD set with a DVD with 33 videos on them, which is great value. I think that ABBA are the perfect pop group, and I love ABBA. All good people love ABBA. It's a curious thing. In opposition to the ground zero theory of punk rock put about by Joe Strummer and that dreadful man, Canadian journalist, I don't even think I'm going to mention his name, pretty much claims to have invented punk rock in Canada, that, oh no, we had no influences. No, every musician has influences, every single one, strong influences. But I knew most of the punk musicians in Vancouver back in the 70s and early 80s. Who were their favorite bands? Black Sabbath was one. AC/DC was another one. And ABBA, perhaps surprisingly, was another one. So those are my thoughts on ABBA. And let's take a final look at the chat. Half Galician asks, with all the catalogs being bought, what would ABBA command if we use recent Springsteen, Bob Dylan et al.? I've seen the hypothesis advanced that these companies that are buying the catalogs, publishing rights or mechanical rights, they're making a big mistake and they're blowing a lot of money because they need to make the money back. So they are going to be charging like Beatles-like rates to use the song. And what's going to happen is that people who make movies and TV shows are going to say, we can get this really good song that people like in our movie for, I don't know, a fifth of the price of what's being asked, for a Beatles song or whatever. Or now, Neil Young song or, all of Springsteen, all of the rest of them. No remastering sounds better than a clean first-year pressing, says Helper. Gotta disagree with you there. Jim Smith says, KMG, I like ABBA and I like the Eagles. This is possible. Well, anything's possible. It just, that scene in The Big Lebowski with Lebowski in the cab with the black cab driver who's got the Eagles playing? My reaction to this is exactly what Lebowski's would have been. Probably in those words. Don Willis says, ABBA will do you no harm. Sly Stone, 1976. UMG is ticker for Universal. You can look up exactly what they own, says Half Galician. Star Rover says, ABBA made the world a better place. Writer thought he would enjoy this Abba segment more, says Don Willis. They must think their great works are yet to come, says Oscar Toe. I don't. It's remarkable they made an album at all, because typically what happens, one has to be in a certain kind of mindset, and typically, under the age of 30, to think that, making pop records is, what you want to do. I mean, the two men in ABBA have had various different music projects, back to roots stuff, that sort of thing. But, there's also the fear, are we going to come out with something that people are going to think are no good? That, they're going to think we've become ridiculous, that we don't have enough money, Don Willis says, open for string cheese incident. Nuked spinach live shows were legends, said Don Willis. Okay. Afghalician says, need the bag of Costco frozen salmon steaks. Nuke at 6 minutes. Throw in some nuked spinach. Live like a king. Abba is still right before Aerosmith at the beginning of record stores, says Dingo Tamer. Do record stores still exist? Do they? I know, a lot of these stores, like Best Buy, they still sell, I think they still may sell CDs, but it's like, I don't know, maybe 100. London Drugs sells, I think, CDs, but it's typically, just these tremendous bestsellers, best of Billy Joel or whatever, very, very tiny selection. Of course, vinyl is outselling CDs now. That's not so much because vinyl is so popular, but because, CD. I mean, who wants to own physical media? Well, if you don't want to own physical media, why are you buying vinyl? Yeah, but it's vinyl, man. Oh, I see. It's not like you like Frida Solo, says Oscar Toe. I do, actually. She worked with the guitarist of 10cc, Eric Stewart. Agnetha and Annafrid were classy women who made every red-blooded man drool, says Star Rover. Creedence is being compared to the Eagles, with Creedence coming ahead. Okay, I'm not going to talk about Take It Easy. I remember I was in Toronto in the summer of 1972 when I first heard the Eagles. Actually, Jackson Browne at the same time, and of course, their connection. And is this the coming thing now, right? Hey, these guys, are any of them from California? Why are they pretending to be Californians when they're, from Florida and Detroit? That's another thing about them that irked me. It's all about commerce, but can you imagine selling your life's work? Says Don Willis. Well, Pete Townsend was criticized for, selling his songs to everybody, right? And he said something like, they're my songs, and if I want to make more money from them, okay, yeah. But the Clash, London Calling, being used to shill Jaguars. Oh man, come on. Yeah, I mean, the Doors, they stood up against this. John Densmore, not going to do it. So I suppose when the last one is finally dead, then we'll see them. We'll hear them on commercials. Old Volvos do no harm, says Don Willis. Some old Volvos were hot, says Jogan 666. I think the Saint had a Volvo. Oscar Toe says, I'm going to heat up a big bowl of cream corn and listen to ABBA until I pass out. Steve Jones, Clem Burke, Michael Des Bars, that's a band, says Chogakin 666. Des Bars, I mean, he never really made it, did he? He was in this band, what was it called? Silverhead? That had, I'm generally not one of these people to go on about misogyny, but they had an album with a, you wouldn't be able to put this cover out now. What was it called? 16 and Savaged. And it's, oh dear. It's just, I'm not recommending that you look it up, right? But yeah, apparently they're lady killers and they like their ladies young and they just use them and then discard them. And okay. Hey, I'm going to wrap it up now. I'm going to be back on the air tomorrow at 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern. Thanks so much for tuning in. I really appreciate it. And what is coming up? What's coming up on the show? Just let me, on Theater Thursday, I'm going to be talking about Barbara Koppel's, 1975 documentary, which is called Harlan County, USA. It's about coal mining and the union. And on the book club, I'm going to be talking about Joris Karl Huysman's novel about demonology, Satanism, the occult, and it's called Là-bas, or Down There. And next week on Music Monday, I'm going to be talking about one of my favorite bands. They're from Cleveland, and they're called Pere Ubu. So, if you'd like to support the live stream, my PayPal account is linked to kevin_grace@hotmail.com. If you're in Canada, donations may be made to the live stream directly via interact@kevingrace@shaw.ca. And as always, I leave you with this. In these days of social atomization and civilizational collapse, I do dearly wish that you, my dear viewers and listeners, manage to forge a genuine human connection in order to ease the burden. Good night.